Now, all behind me is a display of what it really was like inside those houses. These houses were very long. They could be 70, 80 or 100 metres long, or in yards if you like. The humans lived in this part, uphill, and there was a drain run down the middle. Beyond that little barrier were the cattle and some horses. And in the winter they'd have various other animals in there too, because they all benefited from the heat. This didn't just apply to the north of Scotland, because when they went to America, they took this style of house to Canada, as I was explaining, with the Red River Valley. And had the Highlanders not, and particularly the Sutherland Highlanders, not brought this technology with them, when they faced winters of minus 40 degrees centigrade, they would have died of hypothermia. Trying to build wooden cabins, not really knowing how to do it, they said, don't do that. Dig down into the permafrost, make the walls thick with turf, or sods, they call them in North America. And Canada and the west, the northern part of the United States, were won, long before there were railways, by sod houses, or soddies, they call them. So this isn't just the history of the Highlands.
Can you say a bit about how did they get the arc shape?
Yeah. The actual walls weren't straight. There's no straight lines in these buildings. It's much stronger, more resilient if you have an arch. The original buildings had moss fur which came out of the peat, all pegged with these pegs. You can actually see pegs in this. This is from the wreck of a Danish ship turned upside down, and this put in place of the crux, which would have been in the original building. It's from an old house in Strathnaver, which we actually dismantled and put parts of it. So we got to understand how these black houses were actually put together. Unless you take one to pieces and then get old men who understood and who helped to gather things for houses like that when they were young, you'd never really know what they were.
Did you say that was taken from a ship, a boat?
We have the figurehead of the boat actually, called the Torvaldson, and it was wrecked in Strathnaver about 1860. And they had a big sale of all the bits of it, and people would buy this kind of thing and take it back home to strengthen their houses. Very roomy inside, as a matter of fact. You can walk about. It's not low. Over there is an arrangement with cotton reels. Again, this is recycling. And that would have hung in there. Because the whole building was bowed over like that, you couldn't have a Welsh-style dresser with all the cups and saucers and everything going vertically. So you'd have a dresser and that hanging in there, and you could have your cups on that. And it's all made of cotton reels, and everyone with wire through them, and nothing was wasted. The dresser, which came off Island Roan, it was off an island just off the north coast here. In fact, it's in that print, the Daniel print, you can see it. All of the ceramics are Scottish pottery from Annislan and Bell's pottery in Glasgow when the Industrial Revolution was starting to get going, and they were the workshop of the empire. We've had experts from the Hunterian, the Museum of Scotland. They haven't got a collection of this kind of pottery. They've only ever seen fragments. And they would say, oh, is that what that looked like? And what is tremendously, these were treasured and were looked after and then given to the museum in the 1950s. So we have this amazing, not large, but it's amazing. There's a wonderful blue glaze, which is totally Scottish. That is arts and crafts. It's Scottish arts and crafts, the jug with the green leaves on it. If you look at them closely, you can see that the designs are copied from Wedgwood, from all kinds of Staffordshire pottery, whatever, but the drawing is completely Scottish. Just the way they draw the little funny leaves and everything. So, this is not from the time of the clearances, this is how they survived after the clearances. They were given a peg and said, build a house there on the top of a cliff. And they had the skills to make a house out of what was lying around, to work at it and to survive. And this is an amazing testimony. That whole thing is homemade, that dresser. But 50 or so years after the clearances, they were still doing the best they could. This is a scholar's satchel there, because for going to school. That was the side schools that they had later on. And a nice bookie. So I will move onto this other chair. Now, we have very few actual artefacts from the actual clearances, and it's very telling what they are. Because these two small chairs, that one is slightly later, and there's one here, came from burning houses at Rossall. So they say. Or up the Strath anyway, in that area. And you could think, what would you do if this was happening? The men were away looking for the cattle, they had to bring them in. They deliberately chose to do that. They postponed the evictions until all the young men were away who might have resisted. And they were chasing after the cattle, and they came in, set fire to them, and all they had to do was to take the objects quickly and put them outside. What you could run away with and carry was the small chairs and also fire tongs. And in one of the cases we have beautiful apprentice pieces from blacksmiths of fire tongs. These are the only artifacts that we actually have. A cooking pot would be taken away, and a griddle, all of these things. This is quite an expensive spinning wheel, but they had exactly those. This chair is a very sophisticated chair, really. It came from a house out in the west, and they would never say where it actually came from. But a book on traditional Scottish chairs has that on the cover.
What's a
By Ross.
tacksman?
Sorry?
What's a tacksman?
The tackmen were the Gaelic middle class, if you were going to call them that, and they were the educated people that we were talking about, would serve in the army, or they would go to Jamaica and grow sugar cane, and bring the money back and buy a tack of land. And a tack of land had several of these townships in it, maybe 2 or 3, and they lived speaking Gaelic just the same as everybody else, in the black house the same as everybody else, but they were extremely educated, officer class people, and they thought of themselves as Highland gentlemen. And this is quite a unique society. Just the range of concepts that are involved in it. This is happening at the height of the Industrial Revolution eventually in Britain. So,
I'm just curious, is that why the chair stands out as being, it's got arms on it, it's more...
Yes, this is the thing. One of the things is that there are several different types of chair encompassed in that. That there's a Nordic kind which started from a box. At the bottom part, there's a Sutherland chair which has they're like walking sticks almost, these which are branches of trees like that, which is Sutherland. And then there's a sort of interlace at the back, and the back is very like a Caithness chair, so it's a real mixture. And there are records of a special chair which would have been in one of this part of the house, the Ben house where the people lived, and that was also the storyteller's chair. And they had it facing where the sun rises, and if anybody came in, they would say, "Hickastoy, Hickastoy, sit down, Gavoran, would you give us a song? Do you have the songs of the Fenia, of Oisin, songs of Oisin? Or a story," and they would sit and tell, and there would be old men who could sing the songs of Oisin for 6 hours at a time. It's just an amazing thought. And the story of that was recorded by a minister in Ray, which is about 20 miles or so from here. And he describes coming into this part, Strathnaver, and going into a black house, and he could sit there all night listening to people singing. This is in the 1730s, long before the clearances, and yet they had all of that Gaelic culture which is completely evaporated. And Macpherson wrote his Macpherson's Ossian in the 1860s.